Daniel, hey, welcome to Beam's Eventalks. Say hi to our viewers.
Wonderful, Nadia. Thank you so much for the invitation. Hi, everybody, viewers. Great to be here. Absolute pleasure, and looking forward to our interview.
Yeah, happy to see you here. So Daniel is a European Senior Event Manager at Dentons. It's a big law company. And Daniel, could you please tell me a bit about your career path? How did you come to the events?
Yeah, sure. I'm more than happy to do so. So I started out working in the sports industry at a major sports brand or sporting goods company, responsible for marketing, sponsorship, activation, and predominantly major international events, which was fantastic. A huge opportunity for me to get stuck into a wide variety of concepts, of events, dealing with international athletes from the sort of Olympic elite level to event activations, sponsorship activations at major tournaments, predominantly within the racket sector, so badminton and tennis, but also had experience within the golf industry too. I had 4 wonderful years there in London, and then transferred to a completely different sector. You mentioned Dentons, the legal industry professional services, where I've been for the last 9 years, operating as a senior events manager, working across 19 different offices, putting on all sorts of shapes, sizes of events, from small in person to very large virtuals, to also large in persons too. So that's a little bit of background on myself and my roles.
Yeah, I need to ask here, after all your experience, what type of events do you prefer, virtual or in person?
That's a really good question. I mean, I spent the last 2 years predominantly behind a lens, sort of helping operate and production for virtuals, and have thoroughly enjoyed it. Prior to that, I hadn't had much experience, in fact, very little, only as an attendee. But I would say bread and butter is always going to be for me in person. It's about meeting people, it's about networking, it's making those connections. I would revert back to that time and time again.
Yeah, and I know that you worked in different conditions, like in the big companies and small ones. And could you compare how to organize events in B2B or B2C sector, or in big companies with big
Mm.
budgets, or small ones?
That's a really good question. I think B2B and B2C are very different. Having operated in the B2C environment, obviously, selling a product is different to selling a service.
Mhm.
Um, it's very much sales driven, sales focused. So the customer experience has to be exceptional first and foremost. I think you've got to think when you're concepting or ideating the event, always what the customer journey is going to look like. So that's paramount, that's forefront of your mind. Um, you're also assuming the size of the B2C organization. I've been fortunate to work at a rather large organization. You get to work with fantastic agencies that come to the table with wonderful ideas that are also working with familiar, similar brands. So there's always new ideas, new concepts. Um, Conversely, B2B, it tends to be or can be a little bit more traditional. But that said, I would say the last sort of 2 to 3 years, especially with digital transformation, those sort of boundaries, they're sort of migrating. I think that a lot of people in their personal lives are expecting the same experience in their professional lives in a B2B environment, which because that's what I love to get involved in. I love to take the B2C concepts and bringing that to life in a B2B environment. And I think it translates really, really well. And when you have, how to say, large budgets to work with as an events organizer or somebody who's working in brand or marketing, there's nothing better. The world is your oyster, and you can certainly go to town. But I would say it's being very sort of calculated, driven. You're always looking for that return on investment, and that is really sort of focal to what we do as jobs within events and within marketing. So that's a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, you say a lot of about marketing and sales. So, do you consider events like in terms of business metrics? Since I talk to event people a lot, and often they say about engagement and building a community, and not much about business. And
Mm.
as a marketer, I'm interested in business side. So um,
Yeah, very much so. That's my background. I studied marketing at university and sports
mhm,
science, so the two go hand in hand. Yeah, I was fortunate when I worked at the major sporting brand that yeah, marketing and brand is paramount to the success. Events is an add-on. It's not sometimes always the first and foremost that is thought of. It's very much sales driven. So I have had exposure to working with all of those departments and internal stakeholders, uh, knowing that the role is to help facilitate that you play an integral part of the life cycle. Um, and similarly in a B2B environment, that's something that I'm
mhm,
very passionate about, is making sure that there is that linkage between, yeah, all of the relevant internal stakeholders to make sure that we're closing the deal, or that we're, yeah, putting on an event that is going to be seen in the right light to our end customer, but also is going to be of benefit to those individuals that are trying to sell our service uh, to, yeah, to the end user. So it's paramount. I do not see it as sitting separately. Maybe some organizations run that way, but for me, you've got to be working in unison, and that is the beauty of what I love doing and working in
mhm.
events, is because you get that massive sort of crossover of experiencing other people's thoughts, their trends, their way of operating, and trying to sort of amalgamate it all so that it works for everybody, but ultimately thinking of yeah, of the end user and what that user experience is going to look like, that customer journey.
Yeah, and which metrics do you use to evaluate the event? Is it ROI or other ones?
Yeah, very much so, ROI. So that is probably one of the key sort of metrics that we're using. I mean, KPIs, obviously depending upon what the objectives are of the event. You know, in a B2B environment, it can be sometimes quite challenging to
Yeah.
specifically pinpoint. In B2C, sometimes you can attribute the sales to how much you spent in terms of the concourse or the fit out for a particular product that you've tried to promote in front of an audience.
Mhm.
I always take the long term game. Similarly, in marketing, I think everybody gets very caught up in looking at the metrics. Yes, it is important for sure. You know, if you're a numbers person, yeah, you can pay a lot of attention to detail in it. But I think for me, it's, yeah, it's the longer haul investment that you talked on earlier, building the brand and building the community, that you're either invested in it or you're not. I think if anybody is looking for a very quick turnaround in terms of I spent X amount and I got X return, I'm not so sure that it works that way. Personally, I don't think I've seen it, and I think it would be hard to sort of have that sort of one-dimensional view in terms of running events.
Um, let's talk a bit about how everything works in the events at Dentons. How many people do you have in the events department? Um, Maybe different departments are responsible for organizing the event, and like about internal life.
Yeah, sure. So we're a smallish team. It's two of us, myself based in Berlin, my colleague based in Prague. We've been operating this way for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
We also have local teams on the ground across our 20 offices. Some are specialists within marketing, some have business development hats on, some are also very familiar with the events lifecycle. So we will tap into some of their expertise, but very much we sort of lead on the best practices if it's what we would call a flagship event. If it warrants sort of certain size spend, then that's where we would come in. Yeah, we would help facilitate. But we're also very familiar with working with all of our business services professionals, from central marketing teams, email marketing, digital marketing, video content specialists. So we have a wonderful opportunity to really find out the nitty gritties of what's going on behind the scenes, so that we can then try help scope, scale, and optimize all of our knowledge, and sort of building those core relationships to put on the best events possible for our internal stakeholders, but also for our external stakeholders too.
And how many events do you have per year, for example?
It really varies. So pre-COVID, as a team and as a department, we would run 15 to 20 core events per annum, and that would really
Mm-hmm.
change on size and scale. Sometimes there would be very large conferences and trade shows with exhibition stands. Sometimes it would be office openings. Dentons has been on a huge growth trajectory recently. So we've been popping up in new locations and regions where we would announce that to our clients or to our prospective clients. It could also be internal events, a lot of collaborative events. Being a newish company, we're trying to get a lot of our lawyers together so that we can cross-sell our businesses. Um, in COVID, or in the last 2 years since we switched digitally onto online, I think in our first year we did over 400 webinars, which was a
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal amount.
Yeah.
And I spent, I think, over 20,000 minutes behind the screen running Zoom webinars.
Wow.
So yeah, got up to speed very quickly. Last year slowed down a little bit as we kind of transitioned into that sort of hybrid mold, and there was the interest for people to get back into in person. But I would say that we still hit over 200 webinars across Europe, which was a lot to manage. Sometimes it would just
Yeah.
be back to back, and this year looks a little bit more, how to say, sane and normal for us to be able to piece together. And I've had a couple of major in-persons already, which has been really nice to return to. But equally, it's I see the huge benefits and the upsides to working digitally. The virtual space for us, has huge amounts of potential in terms of going to market at such speed. You mentioned data earlier, to be able to actually have that at our fingertips, to be able to repurpose content. Something that we hadn't really been operating in that environment. We had done probably more client entertainment, or trade shows, networking events, but piecing content together has been a really exciting journey for us to go on as an organization, and likewise as event professionals.
Actually, I thought that you have a rather bigger team.
Uh,
Uh,
it would be nice, yes.
and
um,
it's like your choice to not to do it in house and not to grow the team, or it's
it's not something that I have a
actually.
say on. I mean, we have a large marketing department, so across all of our European offices, I think we have 130 professionals working in marketing, business development, email marketing, what have you. But as pure core event team, there are two of us. Actually, my colleague, she has a split role, so the
Mhm.
majority of the responsibility falls on my shoulders. But yeah, needless to say, I enjoy it. It keeps me busy, keeps me out of trouble, and always constantly learning, and having that opportunity to work with different people across different cultures is
Yeah.
fascinating. What I love the most is that people connection. That's something that is really special, and why I'm so passionate about working in the events industry.
Yeah, about cultural differences, since you are familiar to the industries in different countries, how do you think are there differences between, for example, European approach to the events, US
Yeah.
or Asian?
Yeah,
What?
I think I work in a very corporate environment, so we try to offer the same user experience to all of our
Mhm.
customers, regardless of where they come from. We also operate with a polycentric culture, so there is no one dominant culture. But that said, we try to embrace the best of the cultures that we have within local regions or local offices. So it does vary, yes, but we run with our processes, and we're very tight on our best practices. So I would like to say that most people that would come to our event, whether it is in Paris or whether it is in Bratislava or in Berlin, would experience the same user journey, when coming face to face with us. Of course, it depends upon the size of the budget that you have to operate with. But culturally, Yeah, I think that everybody understands the importance of an event, the pressures that are around it. Everybody gets that there is an absolute deliverable that needs to be met. And I would say that, yeah, we have a great culture within Dentons, so very fortunate on that. Yeah.
Is it okay to ask which budget do you spend at Dentons for the events?
It really varies. I mean,
In
I think
every.
anybody, yeah, anybody working in events, knowing that we're attending major trade shows or
Uh-huh.
conferences, could probably put the figures together. It's not something that I would be, yeah, airing in public right now. But I think that, yeah, professionals would perhaps be able to understand in terms of it would vary from, yeah, under 10K to, yeah, anything between close to a million, depending upon the size of the event. It really
Mhm.
depends if you're shifting 1,500 lawyers to a global partner meeting in a particular location. You can tally up the cost of flights, accommodation, the fit out, the production, the external companies that you would need to bring in to piece it together, the evening entertainment. So yeah, it can very much vary. We're certainly probably not the highest of spenders, not the smallest of spenders. But yeah, we certainly we like to work with providers that can certainly help our budget stretch to the max as possible. So yeah, that's always helpful when, yeah, our agencies are able to bring in new ideas, make it as cost effective for us at the
Mhm.
end of the day.
What to do if you don't have enough budget? Is it
Scream.
possible to make? Yeah. Is it possible to make a good event of somehow high quality without
Yeah,
budget?
I think so. I think it goes back
Okay,
to event.
let's talk only about virtual. Of course,
Yeah.
in person we have lots of costs, but in terms of virtual activities.
Yeah, I think so. A company such as ourselves, we're fortunate that we have a lot of in-house professionals, video content specialists, people who really understand technology. We have great presenters. We have access to be able to bring in fantastic external speakers, a lot of C-suite level individuals. Um, if we're talking pushing content in the area of law, we have the best professionals available at our disposal. So yeah, 100%. I think that without having to spend ridiculous sums in virtual, you can do a lot with. And we've had a lot of success in this particular space too, and it's been really enjoyable because you have to work that little bit harder, perhaps. Everybody's looking for that sort of engagement factor, be a little bit more creative, think on your feet, as opposed to, okay, yeah, somebody gives me a nice juicy budget to play around with, and away we go. So yeah, totally. And I guess that's where we earn our crust as event professionals, is to try to, I wouldn't say penny pinch, but use that sort of creative sort of juices and try and grab inspiration from others. And how can that sort of be packaged in your particular content or your track? And I enjoy doing that. That is a challenge that I'm certainly up for. What I would say is that with the introduction of virtual, it's asking a lot of event professionals that perhaps of a certain generation, maybe myself, I'm not the youngest spring chicken, but I'm certainly not the eldest. If you're perhaps in the millennial era,
Uh-huh.
trying to transition between the two and your trade that you had applied at university, perhaps, or in your first sort of few years in a career, and then transitioning that into being a production manager specialist or really understanding how this world operates, it's a totally new skill set. Something that I like, that growth mindset. Let's take on that challenge. But I could probably equally see that a lot of others may not find that that's, yeah, such a fascinating gig. So yeah, very interesting transition in terms of where we are right now with the events, sector.
Yeah, you are a dentist for a long time, more than 7 years or 10.
I'm coming up to 10 years next year. Yeah.
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, and what do you think? Is the approach to the events changing over time somehow?
Yeah, very much so. I think the focus when I first joined was very much on getting the brand out there. So when I joined Dentons, for a little bit of history, we were a new organization. We had combined with many other different law firms. So it was all about brand positioning, making sure that Dentons is front of mind, top of mind to our particular clients.
Mm-hmm.
And we were very successful in that. So that was attending a lot of trade shows and conferences and networking and inviting clients to understand a little bit more about us. And after probably a 2, 3 year transition, then it was about collaboration, about making sure that internally we understood who we were, our identities as an organization, to make sure that we can benefit from this growth that we've had. You could probably think of it as a major startup with 20,000 employees. Combining within a short space of time, we need to make sure that people are cross-selling, that they're working together, that we're being as efficient as possible. So from probably years 3 to 6 has been a lot about making sure our internal colleagues get together. And that's been a lot of fun putting on, yeah, collaborative events, shifting 500 people from one location to another to put them up for a couple of days. Sometimes we shift 1,500 individuals that we will be doing so shortly, yeah, in a pretty cool location. And then COVID hit, a lot of that unfortunately had stopped. And then it became about making sure that, yeah, we go back to our clients, that they are able to get the changes in legislation which were happening at a rapid rate due to COVID, from whether it be employment, banking, you name it, across all industries and sectors. I think that, yeah, the world was probably in quite a lot of turmoil in terms of needing answers. So the focus and um, the remit for us was to again make sure that we're providing the content to help our clients navigate these challenging particular periods. And who knows? I mean, I'm assuming post COVID, or now that we're sort of out of it, hopefully, that it will be a hybrid of both. Um, and yeah, I would say that's where we have sort of cycled on our events journey to date.
And you have about 10,000 of employees, if I'm not mistaken.
We have
Uh,
10,000 plus lawyers, and we have another 10,000 employees. So we're over 20,000 employees in total.
yeah, and do you have any internal events for the employees, like
Yeah,
parties, something like that? And
yeah,
I believe it's virtual since it's 20 offices.
yeah. So we've had quite a lot of virtuals. So we've been very focused on operating sort of town halls to make sure, especially in the height of the pandemic, that our senior stakeholders, management, were communicating with employees on a very regular basis. And also each departments and offices were also hosting their internal events. We actually ran for our marketing department 130 employees a brilliant virtual retreat, which was really cool, very exciting to get on board with. We were given some budget as well, which was always nice. We had some great external keynote speakers that which brought a little bit of a different light and
Mhm.
different energy. We put a concept and a theme together as if we were traveling. We managed to get um, yeah, management to dress up, fancy dress. We had a lot of fun and engagement, and um, for an organization such as us, it was how to say, I wouldn't say it was groundbreaking, but it was quite new. It was quite risky. We asked a lot of presenters to put themselves out there. But in order to really feel that authenticity and that connection, that vibe, I think it was very much necessary. We wanted to break the mold from just another standard Zoom webinar. So yeah, in the online space, we've been pretty creative with it, and I think that, yeah, as a template, a lot of other departments have looked to replicate that. And yeah, we try to bring in as much creativity and enjoyment and fun factor to those particular virtual internals that we have. Yeah.
Yeah, could you give some examples of interesting solutions or scenarios of events you organized? Maybe one event you were the most proud of.
I would allude back to that, to be honest. I think it was at a time where, how to say, I'm not saying that people didn't trust the vision, but it was like, no, no, trust me, people will really enjoy this. And the fact that, yeah, we started with the right invitation, it goes back to, running the basics of what an event is. making sure that it is appealing, that it is eye catchy, that there is a call to action, and sort of promoting a carrot to individuals. We made it very much about the team in a time where people felt unsafe and isolated. That we really wanted to build those connections. We brought in
Mhm.
an external virtual team building organization from the UK that had so much energy and vibrancy and green screen and technology and using Kahoot and music and quizzing, and that for us was new. We hadn't done anything like that in the virtual space before. And then the feedback was fantastic. We were very attuned to people's attention spans, making sure in the past these would have been on-site events, which are also a lot of fun, but they would have been probably 2 or 3 days.
Mhm.
We needed to condense this into a shorter time frame to break it up, to offer some prizes and some incentives and an opportunity for people to connect and really build that rapport. And we had a lot of fun doing it. Our creative in-house video content team came to the table with a lot of video and a lot of animation and breaking up the tracks. And the feedback was fantastic to receive. And I would say probably of all the events that I had done to date, that was probably one of the proudest to have actually to piece together, because um, I've got the recordings, and you can go back and you can see people's eyes animate as the opening presentation comes on, and it's a video of Star Trek or of something completely out of the new. And we sort of put people's faces on characters and what have you, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Um, with How do you think? What's the hardest part of your work?
The hardest part. That's a really good question. I think staying in tune with the trends. I think that we're
Mm.
working in a time where things are changing so rapidly, that it would be very easy to stick to your guns and what you know, and thinking that that is best. And what I've enjoyed most, I would say, over the last 2 years, that I've learned more than I had done previously, because of the rapid rate of change. And I think that being very open to trying, um,
Mhm.
to potentially, I wouldn't say being risky with it, but understanding that you got to do something a little bit different. That people have been so familiar with a certain style and a certain approach for a number of years potentially. So yeah, definitely staying in tune. Personally, me, I love to consume content. I'm avid into watching YouTube, or if it's TikToks, and
Mhm.
reading white papers and seeing what some of the biggest sort of global events agencies are doing in this marketplace, and trying to just cherry pick items that, okay, yeah, that would be really cool. If we've got budget to do this, then perhaps we can add that in. So I would say it was probably the most challenging. And second to that, I think, is um, in a large corporate organization, there's going to always be stakeholder management. I think it's crucial that you are on top of your game, that you're able to communicate your ideas, that you're able to get buy-in, and you're also able to work well with teams and individuals, especially in such large organizations. You mentioned culture
Mhm.
earlier. We work on different time zones. People have different ideas and different concepts, and it's how do you fit into that? How do you make sure that the event and the journey and the user experience for Dentons, or for the attendees, is going to be seamless. So yeah, that would be number two.
You said about trends. Which trends do you see now, and probably what we have in the industry in 10 years, for example?
Yeah, massively. For me, I think ESG as a trend, the sustainability aspect is huge. I think that's something that virtual has brought to the table in terms of reducing the cost of your carbon footprint. I think that will remain. I think that anybody working in the finance department or running budgets from a COO point of view would be probably quite happy. It remains to be seen in terms of what the long-term implications of that, of not having people meet face to face. I'm yet to see, and I've looked at a ton of platforms out there, um, what can replicate it. Certainly excited by what the metaverse could bring to the table. That is a huge vibe. Would love to get my hands involved, and I've had a couple of demonstrations, and I think it's exciting. Certainly exciting space, one to watch out for. Um, those would spark it too. And I would say a third, and probably not so popular, is cost. Unfortunately, I think supply chain management. I think that, yeah, in the last 2 years we've seen a rise in costs. So it would be really interesting to see whether virtual, as that sort of broadens its horizons and offers more products, whether that becomes more attractive, becomes cheaper, and I'm sure it will, and how that actually competes with in person, or whether it becomes a hybrid of the two. But yeah, certainly very interesting times for the event sector, and yeah, just try and keep on top of what's going on. To be honest, that's one of my main focuses.
And you said an interesting point about B2B and B2C, that you try to take something from B2C and transfer it into B2B. And can you give some examples of such solutions?
Yeah, sure. I think a really simple one for me. I mean, I worked in sporting goods brands, so it's kind of a retail environment. The flow that you would have when you go into a retail store is very obvious. You're hit with, really tactile lighting. It's strategic. Items are located in a certain way at eye level for you to be able to see a flagship product, whether it is signage or branding or materials, the use of color, the use of wording. I think that, there are so many creative ways that we can bring that into the B2B environment when you're running an event, to make sure that that user journey, it's a word that I've used probably several times in this particular interview, that it's really seamless. I think that sometimes that's missed, especially perhaps in B2B. I'm thinking quite corporate. You're usually using, 4 to 5 star hotels or specific event locations. They're set up a certain way. Their decor is a certain way. Sometimes it's, very grand. Sometimes it can be, yeah, not so tasteful perhaps to fit with your brand, and you don't necessarily always have a choice, because that's just where the conference is held. It's trying to elevate it. It's trying to bring a different dynamic. It's trying to bring a little bit more color and a little bit more flavor, so that the attendees go away with, that sort of engagement, that wow factor. And that's something that I always allude to, is that, if I'm on the high street, or if I'm on a fantastic website, it's like, oh wow, yeah, that was really memorable. That's what I think the beauty of B2C is. I urge everybody to try to bring that into their B2B environments.
Like
Yeah,
a more humanistic approach.
I think so. I mean, that's what the name of the game is at the end of the day. You have an event is to bring people together. It's to engage in conversation. It could be for them to go away from a great track or a great presentation. But from the moment that they receive the email, to stepping in door, to your venue, to the registration, to sitting on their seat, is it a comfortable seat or is it a hard seat? It could be very, like, real basic things, but if you always have the end user in mind, then I don't think that you can go far wrong. If you put yourself in their shoes, what would you like to experience? And that's something that I'm really passionate about. I care about people. I want them to have a great time at all of the events that I'm working on. So, yeah.
Please give one advice to the event organizers in 2022.
Oh, enjoy yourselves. It's been a tough ride for the last couple of years. I think that, yeah, just do it with a smile on your face. I think that if you do it with your best intentions, and if you try to have as much fun with it as possible, then you can't go too far wrong. And be true to yourself. I think that, it is a very stressful environment that we operate in. We have very short turnaround deadlines, a lot of expectations put on our shoulders. But I think that, yeah, if you understand that you've done and operated to the best of your capabilities, then yeah, that's good for me. It's a tick all day long.